The moment I pushed open those heavy courtroom doors, my daughter laughed. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was a bright, sharp giggle that sliced across the murmur of the room like a knife. I felt it more than heard it. The way you feel a draft on the back of your neck. I paused on the threshold, my hand tightening on the curved wooden handle of my cane, and lifted my eyes. There she was, my Victoria, sitting at the petitioner's table, like she'd been rehearsing for this performance her whole life. Expensive black suit, hair in a sleek bun, a small stack of organized papers in front of her that she flipped through with brisk, practiced fingers. Beside her sat her husband, Caleb, in a gray suit one size too tight across the shoulders, slouched back with his ankle over his knee, staring at his phone. Victoria leaned toward him, laughter still in her voice as she whispered, not even trying that hard to be discreet. "Look at her," she said. "She doesn't even know what day it is." I heard every word. 72 does that to you. Your back goes, your knees complain, but the ears. Mine never stopped working. I'd learned long ago to let people think I was deaf when it suited me. Caleb didn't look up. His thumb kept flicking across his screen. Sports scores or crypto prices? No doubt. He smirked. "Just sign the papers, Eleanor," he muttered, loud enough for me and the first row to hear. "We'll take care of everything." I stepped forward. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, flat and unforgiving. The air smelled like disinfectant and old paper, with an undercurrent of stale anxiety. Probate court always smelled like that, like fear scrubbed with cheap lemon cleaner. Once, a long time ago, I used to walk into this building with my shoulders back and a file box in my arms, not a cane. Back then, people glanced up because they were afraid of what I knew. Today, they looked up because they thought I was going to fall. "Do you need a hand, ma'am?" the bailiff asked, already moving toward me. "I've got it," I said. My voice came out thinner than it used to, but it was steady. I took the slow walk down the central aisle, each tap of my cane echoing louder than it should have. Rows of bored faces watched me pass. Young lawyers, tired clerks, a couple arguing softly in the back over a will. No one saw a threat. Just another old woman whose family was here to clean up the mess of her decline. I could feel Victoria's eyes on me, hot and assessing. She'd dressed me this morning, I realized, like a prop. Soft cardigan, flat shoes. The blouse she'd once said made me look less severe. She hadn't counted on the stubborn tilt of my chin refusing to sag. Their lawyer, a smooth-faced man with 2 white teeth, was already at the podium, talking as I approached the defendant's table. Confused, impulsive spending, repeated incidents at her financial institution. He was saying, "Ms. Reyes has harassed bank staff, forgotten to pay property taxes, and attempted to withdraw large sums in cash for no discernible purpose. My clients are here out of love and concern, Your Honor, seeking guardianship only to protect her from herself." I sank into the chair with a slow, deliberate motion. My knees creaked in protest. I let my shoulders hunch just a little, my hands fold around the curve of my cane. If there's one thing I learned in 40 years of balancing other people's books, it's this. You never show your full numbers until the audit is officially opened. On the bench, Judge Patel shuffled a stack of papers, his expression the neutral boredom of a man whose mourning had already included 3 bitter siblings, 1 forged will, and a screaming match over a 1999 Toyota Corolla. He didn't look at me, not yet. He didn't have to. Old women came through here every week. "Ms. Reyes, are you present in the courtroom?" he asked, eyes still on the file. I cleared my throat. "I am, Your Honor." Something in my tone must have slipped past the cardigan and the flat shoes. His hand paused over the page, his head lifted. Our eyes met. Recognition is a funny thing. It doesn't arrive politely. It crashes. Judge Patel froze. His mouth parted just slightly, as if the air had thickened. The boredom drained from his face, replaced by something that looked an awful lot like shock. He squinted, then glanced down at the file in front of him. "Clerk," he said quietly, "confirm the respondent's full name for the record." The clerk, a young woman with braids and dark circles under her eyes, checked the top sheet. "Eleanor Maria Reyes, born February 12, 1951. She recited. The judge's fingers tightened on the folder. He took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and then looked at me again. Harder this time. Behind me, I heard the faint shift of the bailiff's boots as he straightened. "Ms. Reyes," Judge Patel said slowly, leaning toward his microphone. I'm surprised to see you in this capacity." His voice carried through the room, soft but amplified. Conversations in the gallery died away. Even Caleb finally looked up, frowning. Victoria's smile faltered. I felt my spine lengthen as if an invisible string had been pulled. For the briefest moment I forgot to act old. My shoulders rolled back. My chin came up. The tremor I'd been faking in my right hand stilled. He remembered me, I thought. My own daughter didn't know who I really was, but a man I hadn't seen in 25 years remembered. "Your Honor," their lawyer said, blinking. "Is there an issue?" Judge Patel didn't answer him. His eyes never left my face. "Forgive me," he said, almost to himself. Is this the Eleanor Rise from St. Bridget's? The hospital audit case?" A murmur whispered through the courtroom like wind through dry leaves. The bailiff's posture changed from casual to alert. The clerk looked from the judge to me, puzzled. At the petitioner's table, Victoria's head snapped toward him. "The what?" she asked, before catching herself. She glanced around, composure cracking at the edges. I let out a slow breath. I could have played dumb. Tilted my head. Asked him to repeat himself, leaned harder on my cane. That was the role my daughter had written for me. Instead, I folded my hands on the table, one over the other, and met Judge Patel's gaze head on. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. "That was me." The years seemed to roll back in his eyes. I saw it there, the fluorescent glare of a hospital conference room, 3 binders of falsified billing codes. A young assistant state's attorney with too much hair and not enough sleep, watching a middle-aged accountant tear apart a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme line by line. I saw the moment I'd placed a hand on his elbow all those years ago and said, "Look again at page 12. They're double billing the dead." He'd been the junior then. I'd been the one everyone underestimated. Funny how life circles back. On my left, Victoria shifted in her seat. "What's going on?" she hissed to her lawyer. "Who cares about some hospital?" Caleb leaned closer to her, whispering, "Doesn't matter. She'll just sign. We've got the reports." They thought they were looking at a confused grandmother. They had no idea they'd dragged their own prosecutor into the room. I felt the humiliation of that first laugh still burning in my chest, but it was cooling now, hardening into something else. Numbers. Patterns. A ledger waiting to be balanced. Judge Patel cleared his throat. When he spoke again, his tone had changed. Less procedural, more careful. "Counselor," he said to Victoria's lawyer, "before we proceed, I'll remind you that the respondent in this case is the same Ms. Reyes, whose work underpins half the current compliance protocols for hospital billing in this state. I clerked on that file as a young attorney. She was not unfamiliar with financial matters." The lawyer's smile twitched. He shot a quick, irritated glance at Victoria. She stared back at him, confusion wrestling with annoyance. I watched her. My only child. The girl I'd carried on my hip while I cooked rice and beans after a 10-hour shift. Who used to fall asleep in my lap while I balanced ledgers by hand. She had no idea who I'd been before. I was just Mom who forgets things. She thought today would be the end of my story. She thought she'd already written the verdict. I rested my fingertips lightly on the worn wood of the table and allowed myself a small, private smile. Not a warm smile. A knowing one. They thought today would be the end. It was merely the audit. Before I show you how I balanced the books on my own blood, let me take you back 3 months, to the first entry in this ledger. Their war against me didn't begin in court. It began when my husband's coffin was still warm. The day we buried Miguel, the sky couldn't decide if it wanted to cry. It drizzled on and off, fine cold needles of rain pricking the back of my neck as I stood by the open grave. The priest's words blurred together, Latin and English washing over me like static. All I could really focus on was the smell of lilies. I've never liked lilies. Too sweet, too heavy. They smelled like hospitals and endings. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself and stared at the mahogany casket resting on its green straps. For 50 years, that man had been the steady heartbeat of my life. Now he was a box in the ground. Miguel had been a mail carrier for most of our marriage. 35 years of trudging through Chicago winters and humid summers, up icy steps and broken elevators. He came home every day with dog hair on his pants and stories in his pockets. He knew everyone's name on his rote, everyone's birthday, who'd lost a job, who'd just had a baby. People trusted him with their secrets because he never dropped anything. letters, parcels, or confidences. When we first met, I was 19 and working in the billing department at St. Brigid's Hospital, typing codes I didn't understand into ledgers older than I was. He came in to deliver inter-office mail, grinning like the world was an inside joke he wanted to share. "You look like you need coffee," he'd said, dropping a stack of envelopes on my desk. "I look like I need a new job," I'd shot back. He'd laughed, and that laugh stayed with me for 5 decades. We built a life the old-fashioned way, one paycheck at a time. One argument at a time, one quiet compromise after another. We rented a cramped 2-bedroom on the south side when Victoria was born. I'd spread my ledgers out on the kitchen table after dinner, pencil behind my ear, and baby on my hip, and Miguel would rock her while he read the sports page. "Una canadora y un cartero," he used to say, kissing my forehead. "Not fancy but solid. We can build anything on that." We did. I worked my way up from data entry to senior accountant. I learned every regulation, every billing code, every loophole crooked administrators tried to squeeze through. When I stumbled on that Medicare scam at St. Brigid's, patients billed for surgeries they never had, dead people charged for rehab. I didn't set out to be a whistleblower. I just couldn't stand numbers that lied. Miguel stood by me when the hospital tried to make me disappear. He ironed my blouses for court, packed me sandwiches for long days with the attorneys, held my hand when I lay awake at night wondering if we'd lose everything because I'd opened my mouth. "We didn't do anything wrong," he'd say. "We told the truth. The truth stands." It did. We stayed. We moved to a modest bungalow in Lincoln Park back when it was still half Polish, half Puerto Rican, and entirely affordable. With my overtime from the audit work and his pension, we bought the 3-flat down the block, a squat brick building with peeling paint and good bones. 1 apartment for us to retire in someday, 2 rented out to cover the mortgage. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. "Your girl's lucky," Miguel's friend Arturo told me once at a barbecue, nodding toward little Victoria running through the sprinkler in her soaked dress. "You and Miguel built something strong to leave her." I'd smiled, watching our daughter shriek with laughter as Miguel chased her with the hose. I thought so too. I remember thinking, I was wrong. But on that day, by the grave, I still believed. After the cemetery, we went back to the house. The rain followed us, beating on black umbrellas and dripping off the eaves. People filled the living room, balancing paper plates of empanadas and cold cuts, speaking in low, respectful voices. I moved through them like a ghost, accepting hugs, nodding at murmured condolences, forgetting almost immediately who had said what. The photo we'd chosen of Miguel. A candid shot of him at Navy Pier, wind in his hair. Grin too big for his face. Sat on the mantel surrounded by candles and, of course, more lilies. Every time I passed it, my chest lurched. Victoria stood near the coffee table, one hand on a glass of white wine, the other glued to her phone. At 38, she had Miguel's dark eyes and my sharp cheekbones. But there was a hardness at the corner of her mouth that belonged to neither of us. "Yes, the market's softening in some areas," she was saying quietly into her phone, angling herself away from the room. "But Lincoln Park multi-units are still gold. Trust me, these properties don't sit." I watched her for a moment. My only child. The baby I'd taken the bus home from work to nurse on my lunch breaks. The teenager I'd stayed up with when her first boyfriend broke her heart. Now, she was talking cap rates and comps at her father's wake. I told myself it was just how she coped. Work had always been her armor. Caleb, on the other hand, wandered through my house like he was at an open house. He opened cabinets, closed them, ran his fingers along the frame of a painting Miguel's cousin had brought from Mexico. He flipped over a serving platter to check the maker's mark. Twice, I saw him slip into the hallway and peek into the bedrooms. I sipped my coffee and tried to ignore the crawling sensation in my stomach. In the dining room, the big oak table Miguel refinished himself groaned under the weight of casseroles and deli trays. I poured myself more tea in the kitchen, grateful for the momentary quiet. My hands shook. I told myself it was the grief. From the doorway, I could see Victoria now, near the front window, her back half turned to the room. Caleb was beside her, speaking low. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, I was just breathing. "Mom can't live here alone much longer," Victoria said, tapping her screen. "It's not safe. The stairs. The neighborhood. 3 units in Lincoln Park will bring in serious cash, Caleb replied. Especially if we do some light renos. The building's in her name already, we just need control. Control. The word hung over the clink of dishes, the murmur of conversation, the distant hum of traffic. My fingers tightened on the teacup. I stepped back into the shadow of the hallway, unseen. Old habits die hard. When you spend your life catching discrepancies in other people's stories, you learn when not to announce your presence. We don't have to rush, Victoria said. I mean, she just lost Dad. But, she sighed. Honestly, she's been slipping for a while. Forgetting appointments, mixing up dates. You saw her at the bank last month. Caleb snorted. Yeah, harassing that poor teller about the interest rate. Babe, it's time. The building, this house, she's sitting on it. We could actually do something. The teacup felt suddenly heavy. I set it down carefully on the counter before I dropped it. Maybe they were just worried, I told myself. Maybe this was just their way of thinking ahead, of coping, of trying to manage a future that suddenly felt unstable. She'd always been practical, my girl. Like me. I clung to that thought like a life raft. Out in the living room, someone called for a toast. Victoria slipped her phone into her blazer pocket and stepped up beside Miguel's photo, glass raised. Thank you all for being here, she began, voice wavering just enough to satisfy expectations. My father was the rock of our family. He worked hard his whole life so my mom and I could be safe. Now it's our turn to protect her. She shouldn't have to worry about bills or tenants or any of that. She should just rest. But she glanced over at me then, smile, soft eyes wet. To the crowd, it probably looked like devotion. You shouldn't worry about bills anymore, Mom, she said, reaching out a hand. Just sign and rest. People murmured their approval. Someone patted my shoulder. I managed a tight smile and let her squeeze my fingers. Her grip was firm, claiming. Behind her, I caught a glimpse of Caleb, watching the room like a man surveying a property he was about to buy. Arturo's words from years ago echoed in my mind. Your girl's lucky. You and Miguel built something strong to leave her. I used to agree. Standing there, surrounded by strangers and paper plates and lilies, I felt something cold slip under my skin. I should have known then, when I saw my daughter staring at my house instead of my husband's photo. Later, when the crowd thinned and the dishes piled up, I took my mug back to the kitchen for more tea. The hallway was dim, the hum of the refrigerator a familiar, lonely sound. I told myself I was just tired, just sad. Then, as I reached for the kettle, I heard my name. Once we get power of attorney over Mom, Victoria's voice floated in from the back of the house. The rest is easy. Power of attorney. The words rooted me to the spot. I stayed hidden, hand on the counter, heart pounding. The calculators had come out at my husband's funeral. That was the moment the ledger lines of my life began to shift. And I started to understand that grief was not the only thing I was going to have to survive. I didn't mean to hide. I only meant to breathe. After that toast, after the hugs and the plates and the cloying lilies, I slipped into the narrow space between the kitchen and the back hall, where the pantry door stood half open. It had always been my refuge. That little pocket of quiet where I kept extra rice and canned beans and old holiday platters. I stood there with my teacup, letting the murmur of conversations blur, staring at the faded floral wallpaper. My hand was still shaking from hearing the words, power of attorney, come out of my own daughter's mouth. Then I heard her again. Closer this time. Okay, so, Victoria said, her voice low but clear. 3 units in that building plus this house. Mom's sitting on almost $3 million in property, and she forgets to eat lunch. I froze. She was in the doorway to the dining room, half inside, half out, like me. I could see a sliver of her through the crack between the pantry door and the edge of her blazer, the glint of her bracelet. Caleb's voice joined hers, amused. We get durable power of attorney. Refinance, pull out equity, he said. If she's declared incompetent, it's clean.
No contest.
Another voice, one I didn't recognize, chimed in with the slick confidence of someone who spent her life in glossy brochures. Better move before the Cook County reassessment hits, the woman said. Values just dipped. I've got cash buyers who love distressed situations. We can position this as a great opportunity. I shifted an inch, just enough to see the trio reflected in the dark glass of the microwave door. Victoria, arms folded, Caleb, leaning against the doorframe, and a woman with sharp bangs, bright lipstick, and a leather portfolio clutched to her chest. She wore a name tag on her blazer, Nina Garcia PR Deucer. Victoria laughed softly, a little exhale that made my fingers tighten on the cup. Distressed inventory, she said. That's what she is, really. Just sitting there. The word slammed into me harder than the wind at the cemetery. Inventory. I nearly dropped the teacup. Porcelain clinked against saucer, loud to my ears. I held my breath, waiting for them to turn, but they didn't. Old women are ghosts in their own homes long before they die. Nina flipped open her portfolio, tapping the page with a manicured nail. Look, she said. If you list the 3 flat and the house together, we can market it as a family compound or redevelopment opportunity. Mom goes into assisted living, you 2 liquidate, and we close before winter. Clean calendar year for taxes. Exactly, Caleb said. Once we get durable POA, we can sign everything. If we play the dementia angle right, there's no way a judge lets her keep control of that much equity. It's practically fiduciary abuse if we don't step in. She'll forget we even asked, Victoria added, lowering her voice. She forgets where she leaves her glasses. They all chuckled. In that moment, I wasn't at my husband's wake. I was back in the windowless conference room at St. Bridget's, listening to administrators talk about patients as lost leaders and coding opportunities. The same sterile language, the same casual cruelty. Only this time I was the line item they were rearranging. I remembered every cent I ever signed off on, and I remembered that sentence word for word. Nina snapped her folder shut. I'll run some comps. Send over the listing agreements, she said. But you really should get that power of attorney locked down this month. Courts get jammed up around the holidays. Don't worry, Victoria replied. We'll handle Mom. She trusts me. Always has. My heart pounded so hard I could see the surface of my tea tremble. Trust, I thought. Funny thing about trust, it can make you blind to the fact that your own child just called your life a wasted asset. Eventually the realtor left, heels clicking down the hall. The house emptied by inches after that, guests filtering out into the drizzle with their umbrellas and casseroles. I stayed mostly in the kitchen, pretending to wash dishes while my mind tried to file what I'd heard. By the time it was just family, if that's what you could call the 3 of us. My head was buzzing. The living room was a graveyard of paper cups and napkins. Miguel's photo watched us from the mantel, his smile now feeling like a rebuke. Victoria appeared in the doorway, expression carefully composed. She had always been good at rearranging her face. Mom, she said, stepping in with exaggerated softness. Let's sit down for a minute. I dried my hands on the dish towel and followed her to the sofa. Caleb hovered behind her like a shadow. She sat close, taking my hand between both of hers. These last few weeks have been a lot, she began, her voice syrupy. For all of us. Dad's gone, you're alone in this house, you've been forgetting things. It's not safe. I'm fine, I said automatically. I've lived here for 30 years, Victoria. I know where the light switches are. She gave me a look that said she'd expected that answer and had prepared counter-arguments. You left the stove on last month, she reminded me. The super at the 3 flat said you mixed up the rent checks. You yelled at a girl at the bank. I thought back. The stove had been a pot of soup on simmer while I answered a phone call. The mixed up rent checks were tenants who'd shorted $20, and the girl at the bank had tried to sell me a high-fee annuity I didn't need. Interesting how the story had shifted. You shouldn't have to worry about all that anymore. She went on, squeezing my fingers. Bills, tenants, passwords. Caleb and I were talking, we think it's time we moved in for a while. Just to help. For safety. Caleb perched on the armchair across from us, spreading his arms along the back like he already owned the place. Yeah, Ma, he chimed in. We'll take the guest room, set up an office in Dad's old den so we can handle the paperwork. You can just focus on healing, he said. Like it burned his tongue. What paperwork? I asked. Bank stuff, utilities, the building, Victoria replied smoothly. You hate computers. It's nonsense they make you do everything online now. Let us be the point people. You just sign where we flag and rest. Just sign and rest. The same phrase she'd used in front of the crowd. It sounded less like comfort now and more like an instruction. My inner accountant, the one I'd tried to put to bed after retirement, sat up and opened her ledger. On the surface, they were offering help. Underneath, they were asking for control. I thought of Nina's sharp lipstick, the phrase, distressed inventory. Maybe, I said slowly, that wouldn't be so bad. For a little while. Victoria's shoulders dropped in visible relief. Caleb's mouth twitched up. Good, she said. We'll start bringing things tomorrow. Oh, and I'll just take your car keys for now. With everything going on, I'd feel better if you weren't driving. She plucked them from the hook by the door before I could protest. Not that I would have, not then. I let her have that small victory. It's easier to track what's being taken when you don't fight every skirmish. Later that week, Caleb appeared at the dining table with a neat stack of forms. Just housekeeping, he said, sliding a pen toward me. Mail forwarding. We'll route the boring stuff to us so you don't have to deal. The top sheet did look like a USPS change of address notice. The pages underneath, though, were thicker stock, with boxes for primary contact, authorized manager, billing address. My eyes caught phrases account notifications, correspondence, statement delivery. Why so many pages for mail? I asked, picking up the pen. Everything's bundled now, he said quickly. Utilities, bank, insurance. They streamline. Just sign the first page and the last. We'll handle the rest. I signed once, twice, watching his hands. He whisked the stack away almost before the ink was dry. After they went upstairs to argue softly about closet space, I went to my desk. From the bottom drawer, beneath old tax returns and Miguel's pension letters, I took out a lined notebook and a ballpoint pen. On the first page, I wrote the date. Then, Caleb mail forms unclear contents signed under vague description. My handwriting wobbled a bit, but every letter was legible. I underlined the words, vague description, twice. The next week, my mail grew thinner. Circulars, church bulletins, catalogs still came, but no bank statements, no utility bills. The familiar white envelopes with green logos were gone. Then the phone rang. Mrs. Reyes. A bright young voice chirped. This is Tasha from First Lake Savings. I just wanted to make sure you were happy with the new financial advisor your daughter chose for you. My what? I asked. Your advisor, she repeated. The one added to your profile last week. Victoria Caldwell. We always like to check in when a client updates their account access. My free hand tightened around the notebook. Oh, I said lightly. Yes, of course. I'm just getting used to all the changes. When I hung up, I wrote down every word. When my next bank statement didn't arrive, I knew this wasn't care. It was a takeover. I went to the hall closet, took my old leather purse off the shelf, and tucked the notebook inside. Then I pulled on my coat. If my life was going to be treated like a balance sheet, then I was going to audit it myself. And the first place any good auditor goes is the bank. The next morning, I went to the bank the way some people go to church. It was drizzling again, of course. Chicago likes to coordinate its weather with your mood. I buttoned my coat up to my throat and walked the 3 blocks slowly, my cane tapping the sidewalk. Every step felt like I was marching toward a verdict I didn't want to hear. Inside, the branch smelled like cheap coffee and printer ink. Pop music played too loudly from hidden speakers. I'd been coming to this bank for 20 years. I knew every face behind that counter. They used to smile when they saw me, call me Ms. Reyes, ask about Miguel's bad back and my scandals at the hospital, as one teller liked to joke. Today, the young woman at the window, Tasha, the one who'd called about my new advisor, went pale when she saw me. Mrs. Reyes, she said, leaning forward. How can I help you? I'd like to see my account statements, I said. All of them. Checking savings, the CD, the line of credit. And I want to see who's listed as having access. Her eyes flicked to the empty cubicle near the manager's office, then back to me. Didn't your daughter? My daughter doesn't speak for me at the bank. I cut in, keeping my voice low but sharp. Not yet, anyway. Tasha swallowed. Maybe we should step into the office. No one argues when an old woman asks for privacy. They assume it's about incontinence or confusion. We went into a glass-walled room with a little round table. She shut the door and sat across from me, fingers already flying over her keyboard. Okay, she said softly. Yes, it looks like there were some changes last week. She turned the monitor slightly away from me, out of instinct. I let her, counted to 3, then leaned forward. Read them to me, I said. Slowly. Your checking account? She said. Primary you. Co-trustee Victoria Caldwell. Added with a signed letter on file from you, authorizing her as co-manager. I never wrote any such letter, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too calm. Tasha winced. We have something scanned. She tapped a few keys, squinted. It's a little blurry, but it's got your name on it. I'd like a copy, I said. Of that, and the last 3 months of transactions. All accounts. She hesitated. Mrs. Ray's, I could get in trouble if. I know bank policy as well as you do, I said. I'm the account holder. You're allowed to give me my own records. Please. She held my gaze a beat, then nodded, her jaw tightening. Give me a minute. When she came back, she slid a stack of papers across the table, as if they were contraband. Her hand brushed mine. I could feel her pulse racing. If anyone asks, she whispered, you asked for a routine printout, okay? Of course, I said. Thank you, Mija. I didn't linger. I tucked the papers inside my coat, right over my heart, and walked home through the drizzle with the feeling that something inside me had shifted permanently. Back at the house, I barely had time to hang my coat before I heard Caleb in the hall. There you are, he said, appearing like a bad pop-up ad. We were worried. He had my landline phone in one hand and a fistful of cords in the other. The base unit dangled helpless. What are you doing? I asked. Fixing, he said, as if that explained everything. This thing was ringing all morning. Spam, scammers, who knows? You keep picking up and talking to them. It's stressing you out. We'll just use our cells from now on. He yanked the cord from the wall with a cheerful little grunt. The hole in the plaster gaped like a pulled tooth. I need a phone, I said. You have us, he replied, already walking toward the kitchen trash. Anything you need, you ask. We'll handle it. That afternoon, the Wi-Fi stopped working. My laptop, old but loyal, refused to connect. When I asked, Victoria barely looked up from her tablet. Oh, I changed the password, she said. You kept clicking weird links in those emails. It's not safe. If you need something online, just tell me. Little cuts. Cord here, password there. It was almost elegant the way they were carving me out of my own life. 2 days later, Caleb came home with a small cardboard box and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Look what I got, he said, shaking the box. Peace of mind. He set it on the coffee table and pulled out a black plastic dome with a little blinking light. It's a nanny cam, he said. Well, a mom cam, I guess. He chuckled at his own joke. We'll put it in the living room so if you fall or wander, we'll know. You want to stay at home, we have to make sure it's safe, right? Without waiting for my answer, he mounted it high on the bookcase, tilted down. The unblinking eye pointed at my favorite armchair. I didn't look at it. I let my gaze slide past like it was a knick-knack. But later, when I sat and pretended to doze with the TV off, I caught its reflection in the dark screen, a tiny red Luddy winking, watching. At dinner, the theater really began. They sat at the table with takeout cartons spread between them. Steak one night, sushi the next, always something smelling rich and savory. In front of me, a small plate with overcooked carrots and a gray, collapsing meatloaf or a bowl of mushy pasta that had given up on being food. What's this? I asked the first night, poking at the soggy vegetables. It's a soft diet, Victoria said around a bite of medium-rare steak. You almost choked on that chicken last week, remember? The grief counselor said your swallowing reflex can be affected by stress. This is safer. I didn't choke, I said. I coughed. She sighed. Mom, you tell the same stories over and over. That's what dementia looks like. Caleb snorted, pouring himself more red wine from a bottle I'd been saving for our 50th anniversary. You should be grateful, he said. DoorDash isn't cheap. We're cooking for you, ordering special stuff, handling everything. Just sign the healthcare proxy, we're drowning here. I wasn't drowning. I was watching them pile sandbags around my life, brick by brick, planning to sit on top of the wall when the water rose. Later that week, Victoria appeared at my bedroom door with a plastic pill organizer. The grief counselor prescribed something to help you sleep, she said. Just a little something. You've been up at all hours. I eyed the unlabeled sample bottles in her hand. The pills were a color I didn't recognize. Not the chalky white of common sleepers. Not the pale blue of the low-dose stuff they gave post-op patients. What are they? I asked. Just relaxers, she said. You worked in a hospital. You know they give you these when you're agitated. I thought of every chart I'd ever seen, every case where agitated meant asking too many questions. She placed one pill in my palm, handed me a glass of water. Watched. I lifted it to my lips. The bitter chemical taste hit my tongue before I even pretended to swallow. It didn't match anything I remembered from midnight med runs. My mind started cataloging without my permission. Metallic aftertaste, granular coating, delayed dissolve. I took a big gulp of water, puffed my cheeks like I was struggling, then swallowed loudly. Good girl, Victoria said, patting my shoulder as if I were one of the toddlers she used to babysit as a teenager. You'll feel better soon. When she left, I pressed my tongue against the roof of my mouth. The pill, slick now, slid to the pocket of my cheek. I waited until I heard the floorboard creak down the hall, the murmur of the TV turning on. Then I spat the half-dissolved tablet into a tissue, folded it carefully, and carried it to the potted fern on my dresser. Miguel had brought that fern home from a hospital fundraiser years ago. For luck, he'd said, setting it in the sun. It had survived dry spells, drafts, one memorable cat. I'm sorry, I whispered, crumbling the pill into the soil and watering it in. Over the next few days I repeated the ritual. Pill in the mouth, water, swallow the lie, spit the truth into the dirt. The fern's fronds, once a deep glossy green, began to yellow at the tips. Then they sagged. By the end of the week they'd turned black and slimy, collapsing into themselves with a smell like rotten eggs. I stood over it one afternoon, my notebook open on the dresser. Plant dead, I wrote, pills toxic. Downstairs, the house was getting quieter in other ways. My friend and neighbor, Mrs. Diaz, who'd come every Tuesday and Thursday for 15 years to help me clean and gossip, arrived one morning with her usual bucket and rag. She lasted 20 minutes. Excuse me, Victoria said, appearing in the doorway with a small silver box in her hand. Is this yours? Mrs. Diaz's face puckered in confusion. The jewelry box. No, Miss Victoria. It was in your tote, Victoria snapped. You expect me to believe it walked there by itself? We pay you good money, and this is how you thank us. Tears sprang to the older woman's eyes. Say, Aura, I would never steal from you, she said, turning to me. You know me. I opened my mouth, then snapped it shut. The camera in the living room blinked. I felt its gaze on my back. If I defended her too strongly, if I showed my teeth now, they'd bare theirs. I'm confused, I said, letting my eyes go soft, unfocused. What's happening? You see, Victoria said to Caleb, delighted. She doesn't even track who's in the house. This is a liability. She turned back to Mrs. Diaz. You're fired, she said coldly. Get your things and go. If I find anything else missing, I'll call the police. Mrs. Diaz's shoulders crumpled. She shuffled toward the door, wringing her hands. Wet, I said, my voice small. At least let me say goodbye. Victoria huffed but stepped aside. In the hallway, out of range of the camera, I pulled Mrs. Diaz into a hug. She smelled like bleach and dish soap and the cheap floral perfume she'd worn since I met her. Lo siento, she whispered. I don't know why she. I slipped an envelope into the pocket of her cardigan, fast and soft. Inside, a check drawn from a little credit union account I'd opened decades ago, one Victoria didn't know existed. I'd emptied it that morning. It wasn't much, but it was something. Tucked behind the check was a folded note. Keep receipts. I may need a witness, She pulled back, eyes searching my face. For a second, the fog I'd been wearing for days cleared, and she saw me. Really saw me. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, patted my cheek, and left without another word. After that, the house closed in. No landline, no cleaner. The neighbors stopped dropping by. Victoria told them I was too tired for visitors. When the visiting nurse from Medicare came one afternoon, Victoria hovered, answering for me, squeezing my shoulder hard enough to bruise whenever I tried to speak. You're wandering again, Mom? She'd scold in private. Remember when you tried to drink dish soap? You need supervision. The story changed every telling. Sometimes I'd almost drunk bleach. Sometimes I'd left the front door open all night. each lie stacked neatly on the last, a wall of fiction built brick by patronizing brick. At night, in my room, I'd sit in the glow of the bedside lamp, writing everything in my notebook: dates, times, exact phrases. My hand cramped, but the act soothed me. Numbers had always been my weapon. Words could be too. The day I watched that fern melt into black sludge, I knew they weren't just after my property. They were after my pulse. You might wonder why I didn't call the police then. March in with my dead plant and my hurt pride and demand they stop my own child from helping me to death. But I knew how those calls went. I'd seen them in files and in news stories. The police see family. They see civil dispute. Forgetful old lady, stressed daughter. Everyone goes home, nothing changes, and the wolves know exactly how far they can bite without drawing official blood. I needed more than suspicion. I needed ledger-clean proof. So, one evening when the house was finally quiet, I went to the sewing basket at the back of my closet. Under the spools of thread and old buttons lay a small, scratched flip phone, long forgotten by everyone but me. The last time I'd used it was when anonymous voices had called me at midnight during the hospital fraud case, hissing threats about accidents and widows. Back then, it had connected me to people who believed me when my own bosses called me crazy. My fingers shook as I flipped it open. Not from age. From something electric and sharp coiling in my chest. If they wanted to turn my home into a ward and me into a patient, I would let them. For a while. But this time, the patient was taking notes. And the whistleblower was waking up. The flip phone took a moment to remember how to live. When I pressed the power button, its tiny screen flickered, went dark, then glowed again with that old blue backlight I used to associate with late nights and anonymous threats. For a second, I saw my own face reflected in it, smaller and more lined than the last time I'd held it, but the eyes were the same. I scrolled through the ancient contacts list with my thumb. Most of the names meant nothing anymore. Ghosts from a case file that had long since been archived. Then I saw it, Marisol Ct. Rajidas. Back then, she'd been a jittery 20-something junior auditor with bitten nails and a keen eye for discrepancies. She'd followed me around like a duckling, asking endless questions about double entries and off-balance trial balances. We'd spent months together buried in billing records, both of us knowing too much and sleeping too little. If you ever need me, she'd said the day the judgment came down, the day the hospital cuts started and the threats stopped. For anything. Call. I owe you. Apparently, the universe had decided to cash that chip. I hit call before I could talk myself out of it. The phone rang twice, 3 times. I almost hung up. Then someone answered. Chen, a clipped, professional voice said. For a heartbeat, I heard only the hum of the line. Then something in her tone slipped, softened. Ms. Reyes, she said. Not Eleanor, Ms. Reyes, respect wrapped in a title. Hi, Mija. I murmured, my throat tight. It's the books. I've got another set that don't add up. There was a beat of silence. Then a chair scraping, the mute click of a door closing on her end. Talk to me, she said. Is the auditor compromised? Utterly, I replied. She's sleeping with the subject. She thinks she's going to inherit the whole company. Marisol snorted quietly. Family? She guessed. Unfortunately. I'm with the AG's elder abuse unit now, she said. We see this pattern all the time. What's happening, exactly? I gave her the skeleton-forged letter at the bank. Co-trustee added without my consent, mail-diverted, toxic pills, the dead fern. I kept my voice even, detached as if I were discussing someone else's balance sheet. On her end, I could hear keys tapping, the rustle of paper. Okay, she said. First things first, you're safe right now. As safe as an old hen in a fox den, I said. But I'm still walking and still thinking. Good, she said. Then we work like we did before. You keep a written log. Dates, times, exact words whenever you can. Save physical samples. Pills, plant leaves, envelopes with changed addresses, anything with signatures. Don't confront. Don't tip your hand. I've already started. I admitted. The notebook, the fern. I hid a copy of some bank transactions too. A small, proud exhale came through the line. Of course you did. Her voice dropped lower. And, Ms. Reyes, you cannot let them know you're lucid. Not fully. The minute they think you're onto them, they'll push for capacity evaluations, heavier drugs, emergency guardianship. You're going to have to play weak a little longer. I've been doing that my whole life, I said. Just not for this audience. She chuckled, but there was no joy in it. You taught me a long time ago, she said. Greed always leaves a trail. We'll find it. I'm opening a file on you as of this call. I'll text you from a secure number. Keep this line charged and hidden. We'll need one big piece proof of intent, not just negligence. Malice. I understand, I said. When I hung up and snapped the phone shut, the house around me felt different. The walls were the same. The faint smell of bleach and lilies and overcooked carrots was the same. But for the first time since Miguel died, I didn't feel alone. The next day, while Victoria was out, showing a condo, and Caleb was in the basement supposedly doing laundry, I went hunting for my old digital voice recorder. I found it in a drawer in Miguel's desk, tangled in a nest of dead batteries and rubber bands. It still worked. At noon, while Victoria scrolled on her tablet and pretended to answer sympathy texts, I took down the ceramic clock shaped like a rooster that hung in the dining room. It had been a wedding present from Miguel's sister, loud and gaudy. No one ever touched it. I taped the recorder behind it, the microphone aimed toward the table. When I hung it back up, you couldn't tell anything had changed, unless you knew where to look, which, conveniently, they did not. That night at dinner, as they chewed their sushi and I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate, I let my eyes go glassy and my mouth go slack. I asked Victoria the same question twice, pretended not to remember that she'd already told me where she'd parked. She rolled her eyes and launched into a speech about decline and accepting help. Caleb, tipsy on my wine, boasted about flipping Mom's building by fall. All those old fixtures, he said, waving his fork. We rip that junk out, slap in some gray vinyl and quartz, and boom, instant profit. If we stage it right, the buyers won't even ask what happened to the little old lady. Well, she'll be in a nice place by then, Victoria said, where everything's one floor and padded. The recorder blinked silently behind the rooster's painted feathers, catching every word. During the day, when they thought I was napping in my chair, I would shuffle to the hall closet, take the flip phone from my purse, and photograph every document I could get my hands on. Utilities with new addresses, bank mail they hadn't hidden yet, the healthcare proxy. Caleb left on the kitchen counter, with my name printed wrong on the signature line as if they were in so much hurry they couldn't spell it. Marisol texted me a separate, safer number. Got your pics, she wrote. Nice catch on the proxy error. Shows sloppiness. Keep going. Mrs. Diaz proved more than just brave. 2 weeks after she'd been fired, I received a plain envelope through the slot, no return address. Just my name in her neat cursive. Inside were USB drives and photocopies. Security footage from the building's lobby camera showing Victoria collecting rent and cash from tenants. Rent receipts for amounts higher than what I'd written into old leases. Notes from tenants complaining about new fees, since the daughter took over. I took pictures of everything and mailed the originals to a P.O. box Marisol gave me. When I called her that evening, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and vindication, she sounded almost fierce. This is good, she said. This is really good. We can show a pattern: financial exploitation, isolation, chemical restraint. Now we need them to show their endgame. Selling the properties, I said. Dumping me. Exactly, she said. Why let them walk right up to the line? Then we pull the rug. The universe loves irony. The very system they wanted to use against me sent a nurse to my door. Her name was Tara, a visiting nurse assigned through Medicare to check on homebound seniors with recent bereavement. She arrived with a tablet and a kind smile one Tuesday, stepping into my foyer like she knew she was entering enemy territory.
Miss Reyes.
She said, voice bright. I'm just here for a quick safety check. Takes 15 minutes. Victoria shadowed her down the hall like a ward boss, narrating before Tara could ask a single question. She's been so confused, she said, wandering at night forgetting meals. We had to take away the car. Tara's eyes flicked to mine as she took my blood pressure. It was a small look, but I recognized professional skepticism when I saw it. Any pain, Ms. Reyes? She asked. Only when I listened to my daughter talk, I wanted to say. Instead, I blinked slowly. I get mixed up. I murmured, my husband, where is Miguel? A flicker. Tara's gaze sharpened. She glanced at the faint yellow bruises blooming on my forearm where Caleb had grabbed me last week when I fumbled a glass. "How did you get these?" she asked, brushing them with gentle fingers. "Oh, she bumps into everything," Victoria cut in. "She's always reaching for things without looking. We had to hide the cleaning products after she almost drank dish soap." That was a new variation on the story. Even Tara's eyebrows arched. She said noncommittally. She peered over her shoulder and noticed the walker parked by the wall. "You using that regularly?" she asked me. I hated that thing on sight. A bulky metal frame they'd ordered off the internet and insisted I needed. I'd only touched it when forced. "I don't like it," I said, then corrected myself. "It makes noise." "She refuses," Victoria sighed. "She doesn't understand it's for her own good." Tara scribbled something on her tablet. Then, under the pretense of adjusting my pillow, she slipped a small card into my palm. Her thumb pressed it there firm. "If you ever feel unsafe," she murmured, so quietly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Call this number." Direct line. Our eyes met. I let mine unfocus a little, let my mouth sag. "I get so tired," I said loudly. "My daughter, she takes care of me, doesn't she?" "Of course she does," Tara said, straightening. Her professional smile slid back into place. "And you said you're, what was it, transitioning her to full guardianship?" Victoria preened. "The paperwork's in progress," she said. "It's a lot, but once it's done, everything will be smoother. For her." Tara's pen paused. "Guardianship, she said lightly. "Court involved then?" "Yes," Victoria said. "Our lawyer says it's just a formality. Mom's clearly not capable of handling finances anymore." Tara nodded, but her eyes were cold. "I see," she said. "Well, thank you. I think I have what I need for now." After she left, my flip phone buzzed in the closet. "We're opening a file," Marisol's text read. "Nurse flagged you. Need one big piece next, proof of intent re-removal sale." Proof of intent. I didn't have to wait long. That night I lay in bed with my door cracked open, listening to the muffled hunt of their voices drifting up the stairs. The TV was off. This was the real conversation. "We should book the tour," Caleb said. "Nina says she can have buyers lined up as soon as we can show the property's vacant. Mom's not going to just move into a condo," Victoria replied. "She'll kick and scream. We need a facility. Somewhere they lock the doors." "Oak Valley Memory Care," he said. "Nina recommended it. Cheaper than the fancy ones, still sounds nice. We dump her there before we list. By the time the sale closes, she'll be calling the nurse's mom." They both laughed. "Dump her before the building hits the market." I lay there in the dark, my fingers resting on the cool plastic of the flip phone hidden under my pillow. They were accelerating their timeline. So would I. If I could survive Oak Valley, I thought, if I could walk into that ward and back out again, I'd drag their whole plan into the light. And this time, they wouldn't be the only ones who came prepared to court. Marisol called me the next morning, right after Victoria left for a showing, and Caleb announced he was meeting a contractor about my building. "Okay," she said without preamble. "They're talking about Oak Valley, right?" "Yes," I said, keeping my voice low, my bedroom door half closed. "And guardianship. They think it's just a formality." "Good," she said. "Let them think that. We're going to do something similar to what you did at St. Bridget's, Miss Ray's. We're going to let them cook the books. Then we show the judge the mess they made." Her confidence steadied me. "What does that look like?" I asked. "They'll file a guardianship petition," she said. "We want them to exaggerate, to lie. That creates perjury. We want them to start moving assets. That makes a traceable trail. I've already spoken to my supervisor. When your name came up, he nearly dropped his coffee." "I'm not that interesting," I said, but part of me warmed. I was just stubborn. "You were the reason a lot of people started doing their jobs right," she replied. "Including a young attorney named Patel." I reached out. "When he saw your name on a pending file, he requested reassignment to your case. He remembers." I asked. "He clerked under the judge you helped," she said. "He remembers the woman who walked into court with 3 cardboard boxes and took down a hospital. He won't let this slide." I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dead fern. "What about the pills?" I asked. "I've got a forensic pharmacist on standby," she said. Mail me samples. Keep some hidden at home. We'll get a tox report. Subpoenas are prepped for your bank and the title office for your properties. The moment they file, we pull everything. And in the meantime, I asked. In the meantime, you play the role they wrote for you, she said softly. You fail just enough tests to make them cocky. You act just confused enough that they keep talking in front of you. Every time they hand you a pen, you make it harder for them to claim those signatures are valid. I smiled despite myself. I've started signing with my left hand, I admitted. It looks like a drunk spider. Perfect, she said. Just make sure you write down every time. Date, time, what they told you were signing. The more contemporaneous notes, the better. After we hung up, I took my notebook from the drawer. The next time Caleb slid a paper across the table, Medicare update form, he said. I picked up the pen with my left hand. Use your right, Mom, Victoria snapped. You always use your right. It hurts, I mumbled, clutching my wrist. Arthritis. Her eyes flicked to the faint scabs where her nails had dug in last week. Guilt, or fear of evidence, softened her expression. Fine, she said. Just do your best. My best produced a jagged smear over the line. When they left the room, celebrating in whispers, I opened my notebook. Signed Medicare form. I wrote, left hand. Victoria holding my wrist. Said, just do your best. The pills I taped in little Ziploc bags under my dresser, alongside a handful of the slimy black fern leaves, labeled by date. The audio files from dinner conversations and hallway arguments went onto a flash drive I tucked inside an old plastic knitting needle, the kind that unscrewed at one end. No one ever looked twice at my yarn basket. Victoria and Caleb, oblivious, marched ahead with their plan. I watched from the couch one afternoon as they huddled at the dining table. Guardianship petitions spread out before them. The nanny cam's red eye blinked above them, recording their performance of filial duty. Their words told a different story. Make sure you put the dish soap thing, Caleb said, chewing on the end of a pen. Judges eat that up. Victoria's pen scratched across the page. Mom has attempted to ingest hazardous substances, she muttered as she wrote. Check. And the wandering. And the forgetting my name. She never forgets your name, he scoffed. She forgets mine. She doesn't respect you, Victoria shot back. There's a difference. She's not Mom anymore, he said. She's a liability. This is us cleaning up. I lay under a throw blanket, eyes half closed, letting my breathing slow. Liability, distressed inventory. They'd learned the language of exploitation well. A week later, they brought in Dr. Lowell. He was exactly the kind of clinician that makes real doctors hang their heads cheap cologne, a too-wide tie, eyes that never quite met mine. He spent 5 minutes in our living room, asking leading questions while Victoria hovered behind him like a stage manager. What day is it, Eleanor? He asked. Tuesday, I said. It was Wednesday. I knew that. I'd written it down that morning. And who is this? He asked, gesturing toward my daughter. I let my gaze drift over her face, then past her shoulder, feigning a little frown. She helps, I said, with the papers. He wrote something down with a satisfied twitch of his mouth. He asked me to remember 3 simple words: apple, table, penny. I repeated them back smoothly, then when he tested me 5 minutes later. Apple, I said. Penny. And the last one, he prompted. I frowned, tapped my lip. Depreciation, I offered. He blinked. What? Never mind, I said, letting my eyes glaze. I watched him the way I used to watch hospital administrators slide bad numbers across a desk. His exam was paper thin, designed not to find truth but to justify a conclusion already bought and paid for. After he left, Victoria clasped her hands, almost giddy. He said it'll help, she told Caleb in the kitchen. His report will support full guardianship. He even mentioned immediate need. We could have this wrapped up by next month. Perfect, Caleb said. We do Oak Valley this week, file guardianship, list the properties, and by Christmas we're out of this dump. They took me to tour Oak Valley Memory Care on a gray Saturday. From the brochures, it looked like a hotel. In person, it looked like a forgotten wing of a low-budget hospital. Beige walls, scuffed linoleum, a faint smell of urine masked with lemon cleaner. Residents slumped in wheelchairs along the hallway, their eyes dull, TV's blaring game shows no one was watching. I let my hand shake on the arm of my chair. I clutched Victoria's sleeve as we walked past a woman staring at a blank wall. "Please," I whispered, loud enough for the receptionist to hear. "I don't want to stay here, Vicky. Please, I can stay with you. Stop making a scene," she hissed, yanking her arm away. "You're embarrassing me." The receptionist's smile faltered. The facility director, a man with sleepy eyes and a too-quick handshake, assured Victoria they locked the doors at night for resident safety, and that family could visit during designated hours. "What about going out?" I asked faintly. "Well," he said, not looking at me, "we find it's best if routine is maintained. Transitions can be disorienting." In the parking lot, as Caleb buckled his seat belt, he muttered, "Cheapest place that will lock the door." Perfect. The little recorder in my coat pocket hummed silently, catching every word. On the way home, my flip phone buzzed against my hip. When I checked it in the bathroom, there was a message from Marisol. "We'll be there the day they file," it read. "Don't fight the transfer. Let them make every mistake." That night, lying in bed staring at the cracked plaster on the ceiling, I weighed fear and strategy like numbers on a scale. If anything went wrong, if the pills made it past my cheek one night, if Dr. Lowell decided to push for emergency commitment, if Caleb lost his temper and pushed too hard, I might not get another chance. But I hadn't survived St. Bridget's and 30 years of other people's crooked ledgers by flinching at risk. I pressed my fingers to the hollow of my knitting needle, feeling the tiny weight of the flash drive inside. Evidence, patterns, intent. At dawn 3 days later, the doorbell rang. Victoria appeared in my doorway a minute later, sunglasses already perched on her head as if the sun were a personal spotlight. "Mom," she said, voice bright and brittle, "time to get dressed. The transport's here." Behind her, I saw two broad-shouldered men in gray polos carrying clipboards. An unmarked white van idled at the curb. My heart thudded once, hard, then it steadied. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, letting them see me wobble. One of the men took my elbow, a little too firmly. "Careful there," he said. "We'll get you all settled in." I clutched my worn purse with both hands. Inside notebook, flip phone, knitting needle. They thought they were taking me to disappear. I let them walk me down the steps into the cool morning air and help me climb into the back of the van. The door slammed shut with a hollow boom, the lock sliding into place. I let them lock the door because I knew exactly who held the keys. Oak Valley smelled exactly like I'd feared it would. Urine, boiled vegetables, bleach, sharp and sore, all layered over each other, failing to cancel one another out. The doors slid open with a hydraulic sigh, and the blast of overheated air hit my face like a slap. "Welcome to Oak Valley," the receptionist droned without looking up from her computer. Her scrubs were wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. Behind her, a faded poster showed a smiling couple on a park bench under the words "DI Guide YM Step." One of the transport men wheeled me toward the desk. "New admit," he grunted. "Raise Eleanor." The receptionist tapped a few keys. "Room 214, she said. "Paperwork." Caleb stepped forward, sliding a thick envelope across the counter. I saw the edges of cash peeking out when she opened it. "No checks, no receipts. First month in advance," he said. "We want to make sure everything's squared away." She thumbed through the bills, her expression shifting, almost imperceptibly from bored to mildly pleased. "Family dumped another one, huh?" She muttered without much malice. "Just resignation." "It's for the best," Victoria said quickly. "She needs more care than we can give. We're doing this out of love." The receptionist grunted, stamped a form, and shoved a clipboard toward me. "Sign here," she said. I took the pen with my left hand. My signature crawled across the line, a shaky, childish scrawl. Her eyes flicked to it, then away. It was just another scribble in a stack of scribbles to her. They wheeled me down a long hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing above, doors on either side with little nameplates and seasonal decorations curling at the corners. An old man stared blankly from a doorway, his gown hanging off one bony shoulder. A woman in a wheelchair muttered to herself, eyes fixed on the floor. On a bulletin board near the nurse's station, a laminated sheet caught my eye in IGHTL WAMIKAIO ROM DS. Next to each room number, a cluster of abbreviations and times, tiny checkboxes. Serum, zip, powerful antipsychotics in neat columns. For sleep, I knew. For behavior, here we are, the transport man said, swinging open the door to 214. The room held two narrow beds with plastic-covered mattresses, a dresser, and a small window with bars. My roommate, a tiny woman with white hair sticking up like a dandelion, lay curled on her side, eyes open but unfocused, lips moving soundlessly. "This is Mrs. Jenkins," the aide said. "She's non-verbal. Don't worry, she's quiet." He helped me onto the other bed, the vinyl crinkling under my weight. My purse, with my whole plan tucked inside, stayed clutched to my chest. Victoria hovered in the doorway, arms folded. "We'll come by later this week," she said, not stepping into the room. "Once you've settled." "Vicky," I whispered, reaching out a hand. "Please, don't leave me here." "I can't." She looked away. "We can't keep doing this, Mom," she said, her voice brittle. "It's too much. You'll be safe here." Then she turned and walked down the hall without looking back. Caleb followed, already talking to her about getting with Nina on the listings. The door clicked shut. A moment later, there was the faint metallic snick of a lock. The walls seemed to close in. The air was too thick. I stared at the ceiling, counting the stains. 72 hours, I reminded myself. The guardianship hearing was set for 3 days from now. I'd counted backward with Marisol, memorized the timeline like a closing inventory. If everything went according to plan, this would be a temporary holding cell, not a tomb. If everything went according to plan. The first night, a nurse's aide came in with a little paper cup and a plastic cup of water. "Pill time," she said, barely glancing at me. Her badge read Skinner's. "What is it?" I asked. "Just your nighttime meds," she said, reading from a chart. "New admit protocol. Helps you sleep." She tipped the pill into my hand. Small, white, unmarked. The smell rising from the cup was familiar, bitter, chemical heavy. I thought of the dead fern on my dresser at home. I lifted the pill to my mouth, then let my hand slip. The cup tumbled, water splashing across my lap, the pill bouncing onto the floor. "Oh," I gasped, clutching at my throat. Shanice jumped back, cursing softly. "Damn it," she said, grabbing a towel. "You gotta hold on to it, honey. I don't have time for this." She mopped up the water, scooped the pill into the trash with a gloved hand. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll note refusal." She turned her clipboard toward the wall and scribbled something. "Refusal. Chart. Documented." I lay back against the pillow, heart hammering, fighting the urge to smile. Across the city, while I counted ceiling tiles, Marisol was counting evidence. In a cramped office at the State Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit, she sat at a table littered with printouts and USB drives, a small team huddled around her. My notebook scans lay open in front of them, my shaky handwriting marching across the pages like a stubborn army. "Okay," she said, tapping a pen on the table. "We've got a co-trustee added without verifiable consent. A home equity line opened with a signature that doesn't match. Rent receipts showing unexplained management fees." On a monitor, one of the younger analysts queued up audio files, the room filled with the tinny sound of Caleb's voice. "Cheapest place that will lock the door," he said, laughing. "Perfect. Play that again," Marisol said. They listened to the whole car conversation, to Victoria's talk of dumping her before the building hits the market, to my soft, rehearsed confusion. On another screen, a toxicology report glowed. The forensic pharmacist, a gray-haired woman in a lab coat, stood on a video call. "We analyzed the pills Ms. Reyes sent," she said. "You've got a cocktail of off-label antipsychotics here, at roughly double the recommended geriatric dose. Long-term use at that level can cause severe cognitive impairment, motor issues, even sudden cardiac events." "And these were prescribed by?" Marisol asked. She held up a photocopy of Dr. Lowell's note, hastily written. "No DSM code, no documented exam. By someone who isn't following standard of care," the pharmacist said dryly. A third stack of paper showed bank records transfers from my accounts to RBC Management, the shell company bearing Victoria and Caleb's initials, with vague memos like care coordination and property oversight. "This is enough to open a criminal investigation," one of Marisol's colleagues said. "We can go for financial exploitation, at minimum. We will," Marisol said. "But first, we stop the guardianship and get Ms. Reyes out of that place." She picked up the phone, dialed a number she now knew as well as her own. The clerk in Judge Padel's chambers listened, then agreed to slot an emergency motion alongside the scheduled hearing. By the morning of the third day, Oak Valley's routine had worn grooves into my nerves. Wake up at 6 to the clatter of breakfast trays, lights on bright, someone else deciding when and what you eat. Old sitcom reruns in the common room, residents staring through them, the hiss of oxygen, the squeak of carts. The facility director, a man with thinning hair and a tie that had seen better weeks, appeared at my door with a clipboard. Mims Reyes, he said. Fake cheerful. Big day. Your daughter's petition is being heard this morning. We're transporting you to court so the judge can make it official. Then we'll have all the authorization we need to really help you. Court, I said, widening my eyes. Am I in trouble? He chuckled. Of course not. This is just so your daughter can make decisions for you. Take off the pressure. He motioned for an aide to bring the wheelchair. I lolled my head a little to one side, let my hands tremble as I folded them in my lap. Down in the loading area, the concrete smelled of oil and old rain. A white van different from the one that had brought me idled at the curb. The aide fussed with straps on my chair while the director shuffled papers on a clipboard, muttering about forms and billing codes. Rise. Eleanor, he said. Guardianship case number. Actually, a clear voice cut in. That case number just changed. We all turned. Marisol stood at the bottom of the ramp, crisp in a navy suit, an ID badge clipped to her lapel. Beside her, a uniformed officer from the sheriff's department adjusted his belt. In her hand, she held a folder with the state seal. Who are you? The director demanded. She flipped open her badge. Senior Investigator Chen, State Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit, she said. This is Deputy Morales. We're here on a writ signed by Judge Paddle. She handed him the paper. His eyes darted over it, color draining from his face. This says, that Ms. Reyes is appearing today as a complainant, not a ward. Marisol finished. And that until further notice. You are not to administer any sedating medications without explicit court order. Do you understand? The officer's presence made the understand more than rhetorical. The director sputtered. We were told, her daughter said. Her daughter has said a lot of things. Marisol replied coolly. Today, she can say them under oath. She walked up the ramp and came to stand behind my chair. Her hand rested briefly on my shoulder, warm and steady. Ready to check out, Miss Reyes, she murmured, too low for anyone else. I tilted my head back to look at her. In that moment, the fluorescent strip light behind her made a crooked halo. I almost laughed. As I'll ever be, I said. They wheeled me not back into the van, but into a black sedan idling at the curb. In the back seat lay a garment bag and a small tote. In a side room at the courthouse, away from the bustling hallway, Marisol unzipped the bag and hung up my old navy blazer. I hadn't seen it since Miguel's retirement party. I wasn't sure about the size, she said, but the dry cleaner did his best. It slid over my shoulders like it had been waiting. The neatly pressed slacks, the sensible heels, the pearl studs Miguel had saved 3 Christmases to buy. All of it went on piece by piece, each item reclaiming a piece of me. I stood in front of the little mirror, smoothing my hair back, pinching color into my cheeks. The woman who stared back still had lines around her mouth, still had grief in her eyes. But she also had steel in her spine. Marisol watched me with a small, fierce smile. You got them to put it all in writing, she said. No, let's make them read it aloud. Through the wall, I could hear the muffled drone of Victoria's lawyer, already winding up his speech about decline and danger, about the burden of care and the tragedy of a mother who lost herself. I adjusted my blazer, took a breath that filled my lungs all the way, and moved toward the double doors. When I entered that courtroom and my daughter laughed, she thought she knew the ending. She was wrong. For a moment after Judge Patel said my name, the whole courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Victoria's lawyer recovered first. He cleared his throat, shuffled his papers like a magician rearranging a doomed deck, and tried to drag everyone back into the script they'd rehearsed. As I was saying, Your Honor, he began, voice oiled. This is, above all, a tragic situation. Ms. Reyes' confusion has led to dangerous incidents. There was a fire started while she was cooking. There was smoke when Caleb left oil on the stove. I thought, but kept my face blank. Episodes of aggression toward caregivers, repeated failure to recognize family members. My clients are simply trying to protect her from herself. He smiled sorrowfully at me, then at the judge, as if we were all actors in his noble play. Judge Padel's fingers tapped once on the arm of his chair. "Ms. Reyes," he said, cutting across the monologue. "Before we go any further, I want to ask you directly. Do you understand these proceedings today?" The lawyer half turned, annoyed. This wasn't how guardianship hearings usually went. I could almost hear him thinking. I stood, my knees protesting a little, and stepped away from the table. The room swam for a moment with the weight of eyes. I anchored myself with the memory of a different courtroom, those 3 cardboard boxes, the judge who had listened. "Yes, Your Honor," I said. My voice rang clearer than it had in months. Under Illinois' law, a guardianship petition requires clear and convincing evidence that I lack sufficient understanding or capacity to make or communicate responsible decisions concerning the care of my person or the management of my estate. Today, my daughter and her husband are asking you to strip me of both. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The lawyer's mouth opened and closed. Judge Padel's gaze sharpened. "And in your view, Ms. Reyes," he said, "do you lack that capacity?" "No, sir," I replied. "I have grief, not dementia. There's a difference. And I have evidence that what they're really seeking is not protection but control." Behind me, I felt rather than saw Marisol rise from her seat at the side of the courtroom. "Your Honor," she said, stepping forward. Senior Investigator Marisol Chen, appearing on behalf of the State Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit and as counsel for Ms. Reyes. "With the court's permission, we'd like to move to intervene and present preliminary findings relevant to this petition." Victoria spun in her chair. "What?" she hissed. "What is this?" Her lawyer paled. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "What's highly irregular?" Judge Padel said, finding the architect of the stain. Bridget's fraud case, sitting at the respondent's table accused of being incapable of balancing her own checkbook. He nodded to Marisol. "You may proceed." The next hour was a careful dismantling of the house of cards my daughter had built. First on the stand was Shanice, the night nurse's aide from Oak Valley. She looked uncomfortable in her Sunday dress, hands twisting. "Turner," Marisol said gently. "Did you admit Ms. Reyes to Oak Valley?" "I did the intake," she said. "Her daughter brought her, paid cash, said the guardianship was basically done. And this was just to make sure the judge saw she was in care." "And in your professional opinion," Marisol asked, "how did Ms. Reyes appear?" "She knew her name," Shanice said. "Knew where she was, knew the date. She refused the sleeping pills we offered the first night, said they made her dizzy. So I marked refused on the chart." "Thank you," Marisol said. No further questions. The facility director stared at his shoes. Next came Dr. Padel, no relation to the judge, our forensic pharmacist on video, her lab coat gleaming against a backdrop of shelves. "We analyzed the pills provided by Ms. Reyes," she said. "The compound contained 2 antipsychotics, both off-label for insomnia, at roughly twice the recommended geriatric dose. Administered regularly, they would cause profound sedation, confusion, and increased fall risk. In higher cumulative doses, potentially organ damage." "And were you able to connect these pills to a prescriber?" Marisol asked. She held up a copy of Dr. Lowell's scrawled note. "This appears to be the only documentation," the pharmacist said. "There is no diagnostic justification, no dosage schedule, no informed consent. It does not meet basic standards." Victoria's lawyer tried to object. "Speculation, Your Honor." "Overruled," Judge Patel said. "We'll let the jury of my conscience wait." Lauder bubbled nervously in a corner of the room, then died. A bank investigator took the stand next, a quiet man in a neat suit with a stack of highlighted statements in front of him. "Mr. Alvarez," Marisol said, "please summarize the changes you observed in Ms. Reyes' accounts over the past 3 months, within weeks of Mr. Reyes' death." He said, "Co-trustee, Victoria Caldwell, was added to Ms. Reyes' primary checking account. Shortly afterward, a home equity line of credit was opened on the 3-flat property using an electronic signature from an IP address registered to Caleb Rhodes. Same household as Ms. Caldwell." He flipped a page. "Approximately $180,000 has since been transferred from Ms. Reyes' accounts to an entity called RVC Management, LLC, listed as Care Coordination and Property Oversight. Corporate registration shows the principals as." He pointed toward the petitioner's table. Victoria Caldwell and Caleb Rhodes. And is there any record of invoices from RVC management to Ms. Reyes? Marisol asked. No, he said, only withdrawals. She nodded, then glanced at the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to play 2 short recordings. The clerk dimmed the lights slightly. The first audio crackled to light dinner sounds, clinking plates. My voice small in the background asking about my car. Then Victoria's bright and cutting. She's just sitting on equity doing nothing, she said. 3 units, no leverage, no strategy. It kills me. Caleb's chuckled. By the time we're done, he said, she'll thank us. Or she won't know the difference. The second recording the car outside Oak Valley. She won't notice if we sell the building, Caleb's voice said, thick with self-satisfaction. By the time she's drooling in there, it'll be done. Silence spread through the courtroom like ink in water. Even the air felt heavier. Marisol called Caleb to the stand. He swaggered up at first, trying for confidence. Under oath, though, his charm wilted fast. Mr. Rhodes, she said, why did you set up RVC? Management to manage Mom's affairs, he said. It's what? We charged fair fees. How much experience do you have in elder care? She asked. I manage real estate, he said. Property is property. She clicked the remote. Emails appeared on the screen, threads between him and Nina Garcia. Once Mom's in memory care, we can market the building as vacant. Quick sale, he'd written. Need cash ASAP. My business is bleeding out. You called your mother-in-law inventory in these emails, Marisol said. And you used funds from her accounts to cover deficits in your own failing business, correct? He flushed. We were going to pay it back. With what? She asked quietly. He had no answer. Then it was Victoria's turn. She walked to the stand like a woman approaching a camera, chin trembling artfully, tissue in hand. I'm just trying to help my mother. She began, tears already gathering. She's been different since Dad died. Forgetful, volatile. I love her. I would never. Marisol let her talk herself raw for a minute, then held up a printout. Is this your voice? She asked, nodding to the clerk. The speakers crackled again. The realtor's office that day at the wake. Victoria casual, distressed inventory, she said. That's what she is really. Just sitting there. Victoria's face went gray. And this? Marisol asked, lifting a phone screen toward her. A text to Ms. Garcia the day after Ms. Reyes was admitted to Oak Valley. After she's placed, we list. Before she changes her will again. Victoria's fingers tightened on the tissue. It was venting, she said. You take things out of context. Context, I echoed quietly. I rose from my chair. Your Honor, I said. May I ask my daughter a few questions? As the person whose life is being debated. Judge Puddle studied my face for a long second, then nodded. Briefly, he said. I walked to the front of the courtroom. Victoria wouldn't look at me at first. When she finally did, I saw flashes. Her at 5, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Her at 16, rolling her eyes. Her at 30, asking me to co-sign a lease. Victoria, I said softly, why did you fire Mrs. Dyes? She swallowed. She stole from you. She ironed your school uniforms for 10 years, I said. You accused her of stealing a box you planted in her bag. Why? She... Her voice cracked. She was interfering, making you question. And the plant, I continued. Your father's fern. Why did you water it with pills you told me were just for sleep? Her eyes filled, then hardened. You're twisting everything, she spat. We were just trying to get you to accept help. You won't. You never have. You chose strangers over family your whole life. At the hospital. With your cases. Now with this woman. She jerked her head at Marisol. Instead of us. They didn't just try to manage my finances. I said, turning back to the judge. They tried to erase me while I was still breathing. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air vents. Judge Padel took off his glasses, set them on the bench, and rubbed his eyes. Mems, Reyes, he said, voice rough. You once helped the state root out fraud in our hospitals. You deserve far better than to be victimized in your own home. He looked toward Victoria and Caleb. The warmth left his face. The petition for guardianship is denied. He said, each word a small gave, with prejudice. Furthermore, based on the evidence presented, the toxicology report, financial records, and recorded statements. This court refers the matter to the state's attorney for investigation into allegations of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and attempted unlawful confinement. Victoria made a strangled sound. "You can't."
Oh, I can.
He said sharply. "And I will." He turned to the clerk. "An injunction is hereby issued freezing all assets of RVC Management LLC," he continued. "Any existing powers of attorney or healthcare proxies naming either petitioner are suspended effective immediately. Ms. Reyes will retain full control over her person and estate pending further review." He nodded at the bailiffs. "Officers," he said, "please escort the petitioners into custody for processing. They will be booked and released or held at the discretion of the state's attorney's office." Caleb stood so fast his chair toppled.
This is insane.
He shouted.
It was her idea.
She said her mom was gone, that it was just numbers now.
You coward.
Victoria shrieked, turning on him. "You're the one who set up the LLC, who pushed the pills. Don't you dare pin this on me." As the bailiffs moved in, they clawed at each other, accusations flying, the shiny partnership crumbling under the slightest pressure. The masks they'd worn for months finally fell, revealing exactly what they'd become. I watched them struggle in the grip of the law, my heart a complicated knot of hurt and grim relief. This wasn't how I'd imagined protecting my child when I held her for the first time. But then, I'd never imagined my child would see me as a line item. As they were led toward the side door, Victoria twisted, eyes wide.
Mom!
She cried.
Mom, please say something! Don't let them take me!
I'm your daughter.
I held her gaze for a long second. Then I turned back to my seat, to my notebook, to Marisol waiting with a small, tired smile. Justice in court was only half the story. They'd tried to steal more than my freedom. They'd tried to steal my legacy. Now I had to decide what to do with everything they'd almost gotten away with. Coming home felt strange. The house looked smaller somehow, as if the weeks I'd been gone had squeezed it. The curtains Victoria had chosen hung crooked. There was a stack of unopened mail on the hall table, a faint smell of takeout and stale wine in the air. But under that, I could still catch traces of lemon oil and cumin and Miguel's aftershave in the banister, ghosts of the life we'd built. Mrs. Diaz was waiting on the porch when Marisol's car pulled up. She stood there wringing her hands in that old floral apron, eyes red, as if she'd been holding back tears since the day they fired her. When I stepped out of the car, she didn't bother with formality. She ran down the steps and wrapped me in a hug that nearly knocked the breath from my lungs. "Gracias a Dios," she whispered into my shoulder. "You came back." I held her tight. "I told you I wasn't gone yet," I said. My voice shook anyway. Inside, the damage was mostly cosmetic. Papers strewn across the dining table. A dent in the drywall where it looked like someone had thrown something. My dead ferns still sat on the dresser upstairs, a shriveled black monument to their plan. We changed the locks that night. The locksmith didn't ask questions. He'd clearly seen enough families implode to know better. When he left, I stood in the entryway, new keys heavy in my hand, and felt something in my chest click back into place. In the weeks that followed, the outside world did what it does best: process, investigate, grind. Victoria and Caleb were addicted together, then hurriedly hired separate lawyers and tried to untangle themselves from each other in front of strangers. RVC Management's accounts were frozen. The half-renovated condo Caleb had been banking on went into foreclosure. Dr. Lowell discovered that the licensing board takes a dim view of casual diagnosis and undocumented sedatives. The last I heard, his practice was on hold pending review. That's bureaucrat for. Your career is hanging by a thread. One bright afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table with Marisol and a gray-haired estate lawyer named Benson. Sunlight poured through the window, catching dust motes and making them look like tiny, frantic planets. Benson slid my old will across the table. The one Miguel and I had drafted 20 years ago, when Victoria was still borrowing our car and complaining about curfews. "Are you certain?" he asked, pen poised. "This revokes all prior provisions naming your daughter as beneficiary or executor." "I'm certain," I said. The words tasted like metal and medicine. "I won't finance my own erasure. And I won't reward someone who tried." Marisol watched me with an expression I'd seen only a few times in my life, respect tinged with sorrow. "What do you want instead?" she asked. I looked around my kitchen, the scuffed cabinets, The chipped tile Miguel said he'd replace. Next summer, the corner where Victoria used to do her homework. I didn't fight this hard just to die with more zeros in my account, I said. Make those zeros mean something. Benson nodded. We discussed a charitable trust, he prompted. Yes, I said. The Miguel and Eleanor Rise Elder Justice Fund. The name sat between us like a small, solid stone. It will support legal aid for elders facing what I just went through. I continued. Guardianship abuse, financial exploitation, funds for hotlines, investigators, scholarships for young lawyers and social workers who want to specialize in elder law and public defense. I want them to have what I had. Someone to call when everyone else thought they were crazy. And personally, Benson adds, any individual bequests, a lifetime stipend and moving assistance for Mrs. Diaz, I said without hesitation. She's earned more than crumbs and suspicion, and modest gifts for a few nieces and nephews who still send Christmas cards. Enough to say, I remember you, not enough to make anyone greedy. We signed the documents right there. My hand shook a little, but this time it was from age, not fear. Later, I walked down to the 3 flat. The brick building looked the same as ever, sturdy, a little tired, defiantly standing its ground in a neighborhood that had tried to push it out more than once. I knocked on the basement unit first. Mr. and Mrs. Kowalski answered, wary until they saw it was me. Are you selling? She blurted, eyes wide. We heard things. Your daughter said? My daughter said a lot. I cut in gently. Ignore her. I'm not selling out from under anyone. Relief melted her shoulders. Someday. I added, this building will go into the fund, but with tenant protections written in. If you pay your rent, you have a home. That's my rule. The upstairs tenants said much the same. By the time I walked back to my house, my cheeks hurt from smiling, but in a way that felt right. That night, after Mrs. Diaz went home and the dishes were done, I took out my old calculator and the battered ledger I'd kept since Miguel and I first combined checking accounts. The cover, cracked and faded, still read Roas Fumway in my neat block letters. On a fresh page, I wrote of Victoria. Inheritance executive. Impact unknown. I let my pen hover there for a moment. I still loved the girl I'd raised, the one who cried over scraped knees and practiced her spelling at this very table. But I didn't know the woman who sat in court and called me a wasted asset. Love and trust, I'd learned, are not the same thing. On the next line, under a new heading, Lee J.C. White, I wrote scholarships funded, cases supported, number of elders kept in their homes. The numbers were empty for now, but I could see them filling in, year by year, long after I was gone. A week later, with my car keys restored and a fresh insurance card in the glove compartment, I picked up Mrs. Diaz for a drive. My sedan wasn't anything special. 10 years old, a little rust around the wheel wells, but the engine turned over like a well-kept secret. We drove past the courthouse first, its gray stone glowing in the streetlights. Never thought I'd be on that side of the bench, I said. Mrs. Diaz snorted softly. You looked like you belonged up there, she replied. Nothing. We looped past St. Bridget's too. The hospital had a new wing now, glass and steel bolted onto the old brick. Different administrators, same vulnerabilities. Your daughter lost more than money. Mrs. Diaz said quietly as we sat at a red light. She lost you. I watched a nurse push a cart across the lit lobby, a blur of blue in the window. I know, I said, and I lost her. Or maybe I just finally saw who she'd been becoming while I was too busy trusting my own blood. The wind hummed through the cracked window. The city pulsed around us, oblivious. Here's what I learned in all of this. Family is not a license to control or harm. Sharing DNA does not entitle anyone to your house, your savings, or your money. Age does not erase a lifetime of competence. It just makes it easier for people to pretend you've forgotten who you are. Greed can twist a child's view of a parent until they only see a line on a balance sheet. But justice, real justice, is taking the pain they caused and turning it into protection for people you will never meet. Protecting myself wasn't betrayal, it was survival. And choosing to give my estate to strangers who will fight for elders like me instead of to a daughter who tried to bury me alive. That wasn't revenge. That was mad. Now I want to ask you something. If your own child tried to take control of your life and money, would you be willing to take them to court to protect yourself? Have you ever felt that someone was only helping? You because they wanted access to your money, your home, or your decisions. Tell me in the comments and tell me where you're listening from. What city, what country? Do you believe blood alone makes someone family? Or is family the people who stand beside you when everyone else is counting your worth in dollars? If stories like mine help you or someone you love stay safe, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There will be more fights for justice ahead. I closed the old ledger labeled Ryas Famail and opened a new one. On the front, in fresh ink, I wrote Elder Jas Tis. For the first time in a long time, the numbers felt like hope.